Today we're going to be talking about red-eyed crocodile skink care. First thing I'd like to say is that this species is not for beginners. Definitely better suited to intermediate or advanced reptile keepers. Also like to say that we recommend finding captive bred animals. It is possible to find these animals as wild caught. The problem is that they tend to stress out really easily and they tend to have parasites and come in sick. And if you want a nice quality pet, captive bred is always the best way to go. All of our breeders, all of them, we've all sourced from captive bred animals, and we just find that they just do so much better in captivity. They're a really shy species. They tend to hide a lot during the day. They can get used to being in a display type tank and get comfortable with coming out and being out when you're around, but they do tend to play dead a lot or play possum. They'll kind of freeze like she's doing right now and just hope that you don't see them. But they're just really shy. They're not the kind of animal that's going to want to come out and be held. They're more for like display only. They're a crepuscular species. That means that they're awake more during dawn and dusk. So they're not really active at night, not really active in the middle of the day. As far as temperature and humidity, we keep these guys at room temperature. Usually mid to high 70s is best. They can be kept in the low 70s. Just keep in mind if your room is 70, 73 degrees, they're not going to eat as much. They're not going to be as active because their metabolisms are slowed down a little bit. This room is kept year-round at approximately 80 degrees. So their temperatures here are usually high 70s up to about 80, 82. They don't like it much warmer than that. They dehydrate really easily. So again, mid to high 70s is best. Obviously up to 80 degrees is fine. But you just don't want anything warmer than that. As far as humidity, these guys, like I said, they dehydrate really easily. You don't want them going without water for more than a 24-hour period. They will die. With these guys, we keep their substrate pretty moist. You can see it's not swampy. It's not waterlogged because then it would smell. It's just very damp. They also have a shallow water bowl available to them at all times. They will drag their substrate into their water bowl, so plan on changing their water several times a week to keep it fresh for them. As far as lighting, we have, as you can see, they do have lighting. I've got a UV light on them. That needs to be changed every 6 to 8 months. And then we also supplement their mealworms with a calcium D3 supplement. I don't see them out in the middle of the day basking very often, so that's why I do supplement with calcium as well. So far, they're doing great with it. They get good egg production, healthy, viable eggs. The females are healthy. As far as to use or not to use UVB, that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. Suffice it to say, there's enough debate out there and it's not something that I want to take part of. So we cover all of our bases here and we give the UV, and then we also supplement with a good calcium supplement. And it's working so far. Everything's going great. Cage size. This cages that I have my breeding pairs in is what I would consider the minimum acceptable size for these animals. This cage is 20 inches long by about 10 inches wide. I'm not too concerned with height with these guys. They're not big climbers. Now, if provided space, they will climb a little bit, but they tend to be more fossorial. They're going to dig and burrow and be more in the ground. But again, this is minimum size for a pair. Even for a single, I wouldn't go much smaller than this just because the water bowl does take up a lot of space. Bigger is always better. These guys will use the entire cage if you give them something even up to a 40-gallon or more. They will use that space. They're a lot of fun to kind of observe. They're digging their burrows and things like that. So again, 20 inches by 10 inches is acceptable. I just wouldn't go smaller than that. And as you can see, I have 3 sides, not the front, but 3 sides of the cage are covered. I use aquarium background. Basically, you want something to block their view. You can paint it if you want, whatever, but they are very shy, and if they feel like they're exposed, they will never come out of their hide, and they will never eat, and they will starve to death. They just are that shy. So I always recommend covering at least 3 sides of the tank. If you just got a brand new animal in, you can cover all 4 sides of the tank and half of the top if you want, just until they get settled in. And as they get more comfortable and you're noticing that they're eating, you can kind of reduce how much the cage is covered. I keep mine permanently with 3 sides of the cage covered, just because I don't want them to stress out. I've done it with just 2 sides covered, with just the back and 1 side, and they've done fine with that too. But again, you're always going to need at least 2 sides of the cage covered, just so that they feel secure. And as far as cage furnishings, obviously you can see here I've got fake plants, lots of hides. Substrate is about, you can do 2 to 4 inches of substrate, nice large shallow water bowl. You can keep them in a live planted, like a bioactive vivarium, or you can do a sterile type setup. I've done both. They can survive and be fine either way. I prefer a bioactive setup to a sterile setup. I can go over reasons for that in a few minutes. But suffice it to say, lots of hiding places, lots of plants, lots of cover, and lots of water. I would consider these guys to be semi-aquatic. They spend a lot of time in the water. Their staple right now is mealworms. They also get supplemented with crickets. Earthworms are a favorite of theirs. Woodlice, dubia roaches, they're grub eaters, and they really like to dig around and hunt for their food. This dirt, as I said, a bioactive is my preference here, because I can stock their dirt with dubia roaches and woodlice and earthworms regularly. I do usually red wigglers for earthworms just because they are easy to find. I have heard that some species of skinks, that red wigglers are actually toxic to them. That's not the case with these guys. They can handle red wigglers no problem, so any bait shop, nursery, you should be able to find those worms, and they love them. And again, that goes back to like the bioactive type setup. So that's pretty much it for adult care. If you did want to keep them in a bioactive setup like you see here, it's not a great example. I'm just kind of restarting, trying to keep them with live plants. They're really hard on plants because they like to dig, but I prefer keeping them on a bioactive setup, at least with the substrate. They're just healthier. And cleanup is a breeze, guys. I can't recommend it enough. These guys are really shy, so if you're in there doing cage maintenance once a week and changing out the dirt once a month, I mean, they're gonna stress out. The nice thing about a bioactive setup is I almost never clean this cage. I wipe down the glass. I will, pick up if there's a lot of shed in here, I will pick that up. But the whole point of a bioactive setup is that you have all of these bugs and grubs in there, and they clean the tank for you. There is no smell, and there's much less stress on the animal. The most I do is I will change their water several times a week, but that doesn't bother them. They can stay in their hide and not have to worry about it. I never pull out all of the dirt. Basically all I ever do is top it up. It's a mix of coconut coconut dirt, the brick stuff that you rehydrate. I mix that with a peat moss or an organic potting soil. But again, I mix it with the coconut dirt, and then I will add a little bit of sand to just make sure it doesn't pack down too hard. And again, stock it regularly with bugs because they will eat the bugs. But the more that you have in there, the healthier your system will be. And as far as keeping with live plants, if you would like to try that, highly recommend it. It's great enrichment for them. Just be aware that they are diggers and they will rip up plants. So my latest technique that I'm starting now, that I'm trying, is I actually cut a cheap little, it's like a 6-inch pot, cut it in half and glued it to the side of the tank upside down. So the drainage holes that are normally at the bottom of the pot, I put plant cuttings in there. And so the whole point of this is that it keeps the plant's roots safe so that she can't dig them up. And hopefully I will get better plant growth. Plants that I would recommend to keep with croc skinks, you're going to want to do any vining house plant that roots easily from cuttings. Some examples would be pothos, philodendron. You could do creeping fig, creeping Charlie, creeping Jenny, spider plants, ivy. The list just goes on and on. But the reason I like them is because they're just really hardy and they don't have really high lighting requirements. So a simple UV light will be totally fine for them. These plants are looking a little bit sad right now because I just put them in this week, so they're in a little bit of a shock. But this is Creeping Charlie. I tried with the ivy. It's not really picking up yet. I'm hoping it will start putting out new growth in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, but again, I can't recommend bioactive enough for these guys. However, if it's something that you're not comfortable with and you're worried about just having bugs in the cage or whatever, that's fine. They can do great on a sterile setup. Sterile setups, you can use the coconut dirt or sphagnum moss. Either one of those is totally fine. I'll show you an example of that here in just a second. But as I said, I've got breeding pairs in these cages. So that's the female there. She's less shy. The male is quite a bit more nervous. So he tends to hide a lot. But again, that's an adult pair. These, again, they're captive bred. And they will lay, females, if they're happy, will lay about 1 egg every 5 or 6 weeks during their summer season. So that works out to be 3 to 5 eggs usually per season. So they're not really prolific breeders. Just kind of be aware of that if you're trying to make a lot of money breeding croc skinks. It's not going to happen. But it's really rewarding when you do find eggs and you are able to hatch them out. In a bioactive type setup, you're perfectly welcome to leave the eggs in and they'll incubate naturally in here. Because I'm a little bit of a control freak, I prefer to find the eggs and incubate them artificially just so that I can control everything and make sure that it doesn't get too dry and the eggs are healthy. That being said, I have missed an egg here and there before, and one day, I'll see a little baby lizard running around in here. So far, it appears that the adults do take care of their babies to a certain extent. If you do find an egg in your cage and there's one of the parents near it, just be careful because they do protect their eggs. You probably will get bit. So be aware if you're going on the hunt for croc skink eggs. Just be aware and maybe move the parents out of the way before you try and pick up an egg. When you do find eggs, if you're going to prefer to incubate them artificially, I'll show you what I've got down here. Room temperature is totally fine for incubation. I keep them set up in a deli cup with just some spag moss. These are the eggs. The one at the bottom here is the oldest that I have. It'll be hatching here in the next month or so. Incubation time is quite long. 90 days usually is a minimum for these guys. I've seen them take longer. But the eggs hatch out really leathery and the shell is really thick, so you can't really candle them to see which way is up. That being said, I've had them turn before and hatch out totally fine, so I think they're kind of like leopard gecko eggs where they're okay with being rotated. I wouldn't recommend turning them if you do find them, but again, if you know that it's been turned over or messed up, just try it. Just take it out, incubate it. You might get lucky. They're almost impossible to candle. But yeah, so that's incubation of the eggs. It's damp sphagnum moss, but not super wet. If you start seeing precipitation collecting on the lid, wipe it off. You don't want water dripping on the eggs, but they're kept like this until they hatch. When they hatch, I usually keep hatchlings in a sterile setup. That is so that I can monitor their food and waste to make sure that they're eating and pooping. And again, so damp paper towel, lots of hiding places. I've got a nice shallow water dish in here, which obviously I need to clean again. This water dish is basically the nursery knows me really well because I shop for plants and water bowls there. This is just a drainage pot for like a small potted plant. So it's just a little plastic tray. But it works really well for these guys just because it's shallow, and the hatchlings do really well. They start them off on mealworms, and hatchlings do not have the red eyes. Let's see if I can find a camera to focus here. So they don't have the red eyes. I'm not getting a really good view of it. They're really talkative, so they'll bark and kind of complain when you pick them up or poke them or anything. But they hatch out with these really beautiful cream-colored heads. Sometimes they'll get a cream stripe all the way down their back, but then their bodies are pretty dark black. It takes about 8 months or so before we start seeing that red eye ring start to develop. But for hatchling care, I keep them in a sterile setup like this, and I just put mealworms just directly on the paper towel. And I monitor them, you know, a couple times a week. Being captive hatch, they're a little bit less shy than a wild-caught animal would be, so I'm not too worried about stressing them out as far as checking on them. But again, it's minimal. That's probably the most this animal has ever been handled, was right there. We just kind of leave them alone, let them do their thing, clean their paper towel, usually every couple of weeks. Like I said, they don't eat a whole lot, so their waste production is not that much. And again, I don't want to overstress them unnecessarily. So changing water a couple times a week, we'll change the paper towel every couple of weeks, lots of hiding places. And I keep them in a small, this is like a CD storage case that I found at Home Depot. They're really great for hatchlings because it's small enough that they can find their food readily, but it's big enough that I can fit in a water bowl and you know, they feel secure. So that's hatchlings. Usually for about the first month or 2 months, they're kept in something like this. Once I feel like they are eating consistently, they get a little bit of an upgrade. Again, it's a sterile setup still because I do like to monitor eating and pooping, and if I have them in a bioactive substrate, their poops get cleaned up before I can see that they've been eating and producing waste. So I do keep the babies and hatchlings on more sterile setups. So instead of using dirt, I've preferred the sphagnum moss. Just for babies, it keeps their water a little bit cleaner. It holds humidity a lot better than the coconut fiber does, and I just like it better. So this substrate for this baby, now that we're eating consistently, we've gotten upgraded. And as you can see, this one's about 3 months old, and you can see it still has that nice cream head, the stripe down the back, no real eye ring developing yet. But I use, obviously, you barking? I don't know if you can hear, but that's the baby barking. They do that when they're upset, more so than the adults. The babies tend to do it a lot. So we're trying to hide in our water right now. So once they're eating consistently, they get upgraded to sphagnum moss. I use a mealworm dish, and I start supplementing with calcium. The sphagnum moss is just deep enough that I can set in the water bowl so it's at the same level, so they don't have to climb up to get into the water bowl, and they don't have to climb up to get into their mealworms. Basically, I try to make it as easy as possible for them to just walk around and, oh, there's water, and then they just take a couple steps more and there's mealworms in front of them, and they don't have to think about having to climb over obstacles. I want them to eat as easy as possible and find their water as easy as possible. And this is working out really well. So they'll be in this type setup for another month or so, again, until they're eating consistently and I'm comfortable with their growth and they seem healthy. And then once they're a little bit bigger and their head color is starting to darken, again, it takes a couple of months, they will get upgraded again. And they get upgraded into a 15-quart tub. And at this age, if I have babies of similar sizes, I will keep them communally. So this setup here is they're on sphagnum moss, and again I have another plant like drainage pot that's used as their water bowl. These are great and they're really cheap and easy to clean. And that's their shallow water bowl. I've got several hides, lots of fake plants in here. The sphagnum moss, again, is just deep enough so that I can recess the water bowl a little bit and recess their mealworm dishes. If you're keeping youngsters in a communal setup, again, I can't stress, make sure they're about the same size, they're healthy eaters, and give multiple feeding stations. I've had up to 4 feeding stations in this tub just to make sure that they're finding their food. And at this age, again, mealworms are still the staple. You can supplement with small crickets. Just make sure that the crickets aren't in there for more than a day or so, because crickets will chew on lizards, and I just don't want to risk that with these guys. I've got starting the bioactive type set up with these guys. They're still considered sterile, but I do pick up sticks and stuff from outside and get a good springtail population started in here, just to help with the waste cleanup. And as you can see, these guys are a little bit bigger. I'm going to try and get a light on them so you can see their eye ring has started to develop. There we go, that's better. So these guys are about, oh God, they're like 6 or 7 months old now. So you can see their heads are getting darker, their eye rings are starting to develop. This is a male-female pair. I found with croc skinks that females tend to hatch out more than males. I think last season I had probably 5 females and only 2 males hatch out. Kind of an interesting thing about these guys. So males are a little bit harder to find than females, at least last season. We'll see if that still holds true this season. They're, again, a little bit shy. I don't really mess with them a whole lot. Let's see if I can keep this light on them. That was nice. And size-wise, I'll see if I can pick one up here, get an idea of the size. And they're still little talkers. This one's a little bit younger than the other one. You can tell age just by the top of the head. You can see this one's head is still quite a bit lighter. The eye ring isn't quite as developed. This one's a little bit bigger. Lost a lot of color on the head, and we've started developing those beautiful orange eye rings. So that's how I keep the juvies. And usually at this age, I'm okay with selling them, finding homes for them. These two are not going to be for sale. I'm actually keeping them back a little bit longer. But at this size, they're usually nice and hardy and ready to go to new homes. I have sold them smaller, and they do fine as long as they're eating consistently. I'm okay with selling them a little bit smaller. Ideally, I do prefer to wait until they're about this size. And that's it for the croc skink care video. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to message us. I don't have any for sale at the moment, but I will soon. As you can see, I've got 3 eggs cooking now, so we'll keep everybody updated. Any questions, feel free to message us here on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys.